Hey everybody, welcome to the Ankerstar Wealth Morning Show. It is a Wednesday morning, and we've got some stuff to talk about what's going on in the markets. One of the biggest numbers we got, and Mike will start with this, the other day, I wouldn't say biggest, but worst numbers actually, is the consumer confidence number from September, and it was, the lowest in years. He'll talk about that and what that means for the markets and how it's to be interpreted, and the result may surprise you. And he also wants to talk about there's a difference between consumer confidence and consumer sentiment. So he's going to peel that back, and there's just kind of a fine line there that he wants to talk about there to make that point, so you know exactly what you're hearing when you hear these numbers. And then I will close with a personal story of a scam that got my parents kind of wrapped up in, and it was really good. And the whole point being is that these scams are only going to get better over time. So I know two-factor authentication, all this stuff like makes you mad, and but it's for your protection, because especially with AI now running rampant, if you will, it's getting really, really good to take your money and hand it over to somebody else and you not have any idea what's going on. So anyhow, I will tell you that story, and hopefully you find that insightful. But before we get started, this is a financial education presentation. You have to do your own due diligence before you act upon anything you hear in this presentation. More disclaimer information is available at AnkerstarWealth.com, and the opinions expressed are Mike and mine alone. So Mike, over to you. Tell us about this consumer confidence number we got.
Well, maybe it's the lack of confidence, but September consumer confidence falls the most in 3 years. And I'm going to get a little bit more into it, but primary focused on jobs and inflation. So, and of course we know that the inflation increase has declined, and it feels more under control by the Fed, but still, compared to, let's say, 5 years ago, it feels a lot higher. And the jobs, we're seeing the economy slow. So, but when you hear the biggest drop in 1 month since August of 2021, that's a concern. It's down to 98.7, which is, for reference point, I like this. They said right before COVID pandemic hit, when, at least things felt pretty good. Before that, it was at 132.6. So, kind of an idea there. Also within the survey group they look at, the biggest concern between ages 35 to 54. So Steve, I guess you and I are no longer concerned. We're out of that bracket and earning less than $50,000. And certainly in a slowing economy with inflation, I would expect it would be a concern. One of the things as far as too is that, a lot of it has to do with the labor market. So, but what does that mean to us as investors? Because you see this kind of news and you think, oh, things are getting worse, or at least people think they're getting worse. Let's look at what the stock market does with this. And I really like this graph from JP Morgan Chase sent this to me. But what it does is it shows there's peaks and troughs for this. So when the consumer confidence is high, you can see the average return a year later is 3.5%. So when it hits those peaks, surprisingly, when it hits the bottom, and I'm not saying we're at the bottom now, but we may go down again next month. But when you hit the bottom, and you can see that over these different data points, a year later, the stock market is up 24.1%. This is just the S&P 500. That's counterintuitive. It surprises you. So at least it surprises me just at a glance when you think about that. Like when everybody thinks it's the worst, that's when the market does the best. And when everything thinks things are great, that's when the market doesn't do near as good. So I kind of say that as a reason to stay in the market when you have these concerns. This is the data side of it. Now, we'll talk about the psychology side of it. But why is that? Is it because when people think things are bad, they sell out, so other people buy them on sale? That might be one. When people think things are bad, maybe the Fed juices the rates a little bit and businesses pick up. So that's a reason. I don't know, Steve, what other reasons can you think of?
I don't know. I like the you had me at the when things are bad, other people sell, and then the pros roll in and buy. So I think that's probably the biggest driver in my book.
Yeah, so it's interesting, but of course, they make it headline news like yesterday, like, like, oh, wow, it's down. Now, to me, a bigger interesting point to this is, what does this do to the presidential election? Because if you have people within 6 weeks of voting for president, and you have a, quote unquote incumbent in there, at least the administration, if confidence is down, would you think you go with the other candidate? I don't know. So, I mean, I didn't do the research on that. We're more focused on the markets, but certainly not good news if you're the incumbent president saying things are good. Another one you'll hear is consumer confidence versus consumer sentiment. And I just thought we better make sure we distinguish. I'll show you, here's a quick comparison of the graphs. They're very, very similar. And those little gray bars are in recessions. So you can obviously see things go down in a recession. But as far as what's actually measured here, they're looking at 5 kind of key sections: business conditions, conditions the next 6 months, employment next 6 months, and then family income, which that's where the inflation piece really hits. So, 2 different surveys. You can, argue survey method, Michigan, 500 households, and, the other one, was like 3,000. But when you really look at them side by side, I think the consumer confidence, it's a little more volatile, but, ultimately they really track the same thing. So with that, we'll take the bad confidence, but we'll definitely take the good markets. So let's hope, let's just say, boy, if this is the bottom and we're up 24% from today, we'll all be slapping high fives. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Yeah, that would be a pretty impressive number for sure if that's what we got. All right, let's talk about something that affected my parents. So this is an article from Forbes. So there's your source, scams to be aware of in 2024. And this is only, a couple weeks old. So it's fairly new. I'm not going to read the article to you, but it does talk about, a handful of scams that you can be on the lookout for. But in our case, my dad calls me, and I pick up, hey, expecting how are things going, or the Wi-Fi is not working, or kind of some of the standard sort of things that generate phone calls. And he's like, you need to tell your mom to hang up the phone. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So anyhow, to kind of plug in. So I go from, not plugged into this at all to hearing my mom talking to somebody on the phone, and she's convinced she's talking to Microsoft, and USAA is on the other line, which is our bank. So how do we get to the situation? And then to come to find out later, once I do say, let's hang up the phone and call USA together, and that kind of helped brought the things under control and added perspective to the situation. Called, checked the bank account, and there was no money missing, that sort of thing. And then it becomes obvious. It's kind of always obvious afterwards that you're in a scam, but it's not obvious when you're in the middle of it. So, and she's smart and sharp, and so if it can get my mom, it can affect anybody. So it all started with, sat down with the computer, and I will say, there's really only 3 ways these things get to you. It's through the computer, over the phone, or through text message. And I'm sure there's more, but the people showing up at your door trying to scam you a little bit, less of that these days. But in this case, it was a pop-up window on the computer. You've been affected. You need to call Microsoft. Innocent enough. Calls Microsoft. Gets Microsoft on the line. They tell her that yes, data's been compromised. There's money missing from her bank account, and started in on it. She had talked to these folks before my dad called me, because I said, how long did you talk to him? She had talked to him for 2.5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
2.5 hours. So then it was more, I don't care what the conversation was about. It was like, ooh, what was divulged, right? And it's tough to remember what you said 5 minutes ago, let alone 2.5 hours when you're freaked out about all your information being hacked. But it was interesting. They wanted her. They had a spoofer number for her to call to USA, and they patched her through, called for her. So you get another person now who verifies her with information like address and publicly available stuff. So she's convinced, and it says there's money missing from your account. And then they wanted her to go to, it says, do you have another bank where you can go withdraw $13,000 in cash and meet us at a location? And then we will be able to take that cash and put it back into your bank and then into USA. Anyhow, none of it kind of made sense, but they were basically trying to get a cash delivery out of her. And, there's obviously people that eventually do that, right? Otherwise, these things wouldn't exist if people didn't. I don't want to say fall for them. I'll say fall victim to them is what it really is. Is that, yeah, all of a sudden you're doing what you think is the right thing and you're handing money to bad people, and a lot of times you don't really get it back. So what are some red flags? Again, how they got to you. If you hang up and call a Microsoft 1-800 number and tell them what happened, obviously you're going to find out that it isn't Microsoft that you're talking to. Same with USAA, hang up and say, I'm going to call you back on the 800 number. That's a proper channel of communication. And as my dad and I were trying to get mom to hang up, the other person kept saying, because she had it on speaker, right? kept saying, do not talk to them. Do not let them. It's like if you talk to them, all their information will be compromised and they'll be hacked too. So again, that if somebody's trying to fence you from talking to a trusted person in your life, then you can pretty well assume that it's some form of scam. So that's what I was going to talk about. Again, ultimately we wound everything back. Nothing hurt, no harm done. That we can figure out. Mike, any thoughts or stories of your own there?
Well, yeah, just when you think of all those times you've got the Nigerian prince that wants to transfer you $20 million and you're like, there's a bunch of misspellings. I mean, think about AI can rewrite this stuff to make it sound so much better. And things are, tricky with dealing with that. So, I mean, I've heard of different scams and obviously one thing I want to add is don't call back the number they tell you to call it back on. Go to the Microsoft website or the USAA website, get that 800 number or the one that's on the back of your bank card, so you know it's legit. But it's getting tricky. They're getting better, and when they can send out 1 million emails, it doesn't cost them hardly anything, and if they can find 10 people out of 1 million, they're making money. So it's kind of scary.
And with the text message, if somebody texts you, hi, how are you? Or, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while, or any of that stuff, all that's doing is to check to see if you are a human being that's willing to answer. And, none of that's the point. It's just making sure you exist. And then once you exist, then it's like, then a whole nother campaign can come in. And again, there's no shame in this. I mean, we all get embarrassed easy, right? Especially when you've been had. I mean, I like going to magic shows, which is really like setting yourself up to be tricked, and I love it, right? And I get mad, but I mean, voluntarily. But it's if something does happen, the faster you reach out to friends, relatives, your advisor, somebody, and kind of own up to what happened, they're going to help you kind of say, hey, take a calm perspective, right? Because you just came out of this thing. And it's just like, hey, let's call this, or we'll call this and we'll make sure, or log in and make sure there's nothing missing, that sort of thing, and help you kind of calm down. Don't keep it a secret. Ultimately, you're a victim here. So it may be a little bit embarrassing, but come out and share with somebody what happened so they can help you kind of troubleshoot and put your mind to ease. All right, that's all I've got for you today on the show. With that, we will see you guys back tomorrow. You have a good one. Bye.